Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode, wait for it, 268. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, listeners, members, subscribers, viewers. Thank you for joining us on, as Mike says, episode 268. I'd say, Mike, that's a perfect number because there's something round, there's something satisfying about it. And I think satisfaction and the idea of accomplishment and the idea of doing something that, makes you feel happy is exactly, I think, part of the outtake that we're going to have from today's episode, don't you think?
Mark, I think it's just like eating a frog in the morning, don't you?
That's right, Mike. Let's give it away. Let's get our listeners and members a little bit curious about what we mean by today's title. We're going to lean into Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog. Now, this is not going to be an instruction manual on cooking some French food, although I'm sure perhaps some of our members and listeners would be quite interested in maybe escargot, the moonshots methodology. However, today, Mike, let's get back to business. It's all about practicality. It's a guide. Eat That Frog is a guide to think and overcome procrastination. It's about considering your high profile tasks, as well as maybe even the most challenging things that you've got to do. And it's going to help us understand about setting those tasks into an order that we can get them done, focusing on working in a way that makes our days just feel a little bit maybe easier or at least more productive. I think there's a lot that we're going to get from Eat That Frog, and it's not going to be a disgusting meal.
No, it's going to taste really good, but it won't necessarily be easy, but the end results are going to be great. And that's what eating the frog is all about. So whether you're a kind of early participant in the world of productivity or you're a seasoned veteran, this episode is for you because I believe that this is one of the most comprehensive productivity books, Mark. I think this is so good because it touches upon many themes we've discovered across different experts and gurus and academics and authors. But what Brian's done is he's pulled it all together. And I think he's got some essential starting points to getting the most out of the day, and which is a proxy for being the best you can be in life overall. So, Mark, I think everything you've said sounds très bien, pas mal. I think we should aller tout droit, go straight ahead and get into the book of Eat the Frog by Brian Tracy.
Fantastic, Mike. Thank you for continuing the puns on the food and the French. Guys, maybe we need a little bit more of an introduction into what the hell Mike and Mark are talking about with regards to Eat That Frog. So let's hear from Brian Tracy himself. He's going to break down for us, as our first clip in today's episode, a little bit more about what eating that frog might mean.
One of the most valuable time management skills you can develop is the habit of organizing your tasks by priority. I refer to this process as eat that frog. Many of you are familiar with this phrase, but for those of you who are not, the eat that frog concept means practicing the habit of tackling your biggest, most important task first. This task, or frog, is the one that you are most likely to procrastinate on. It's also the task that can have the greatest positive impact on your life and results at the moment. It comes from a story by Mark Twain, by the way, where he said if the first thing you do each morning is to eat a live frog, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you all day long. And your frog is your biggest, ugliest task. So we say, do the worst first.
I'm writing here, eat the frog for breakfast. And it's so true, Matt, because there's a few things happening here. I mean, first of all, there is the science that most of us are at our best in the morning. I mean, how do you feel in the morning compared to in the late afternoon, early evening, Matt?
In the morning, it's the time when I'm most focused. Not only am I rested, hopefully from a good night's sleep, but also I'm less distracted. I haven't had phone calls, emails, people coming around. I haven't had to go out and task myself with, let's say, eating. Sometimes after lunch, I might feel a little bit lethargic. For me, morning time, similar to you, Mike, I think, that's when I'm highly focused. So for me, at least, when I'm planning what I need to get done, I'll often weigh it heavier in the morning because that's when I'm going to be a little bit clearer.
Yeah. And there's a second thing that he mentioned in his clip, and that is pushing into the thing that you're resisting. Now,
Mhm.
we've talked about the resistance and the war of art. We've talked about the obstacle being the way. And this one for me rings really true, Mark, that it's not just about getting started early in the morning, but started with the most challenging thing. Because, like going to the gym, if your muscles are going to hurt a little bit, you're going to get a little bit uncomfortable. We both know that from the work of Carol Dweck and her masterpiece, the book called Mindset, which kind of launched the growth mindset movement, we know that if we want to take on a challenge, if we want to stretch ourselves a bit, being fresh and in the morning is a far better way to do it. In fact, you might remember we were listening to a clip once talking about the judges made better decisions in the morning when they were fresh rather than
Mm.
when they were a bit grumpy and hungry in the afternoon. Hangry judges. Who wants to meet
Yeah.
one of them? So here's where I'm going. It's not just about prioritizing. In addition to that, it is having the courage to tackle the obstacle. And Ryan Holiday would be so proud of us right now because we all know that the obstacle is the way. And that's what we're learning already is to get your priorities sorted and get after the big one early. I mean, what a way. Mark, if someone had told me this at the age of 20, in fact, if someone had given me this book and the previous two shows books, Essentialism and The One Big Thing, man, I could have got a lot done in my 20s. Don't you have that thought?
Yeah, I have had it in every single episode recently. All of these books, as you just mentioned, Essentialism, The One Thing, as well as today with Eat That Frog, really demonstrate the dissatisfaction or the value that you don't give yourself when you procrastinate.
Right.
And when you're a student, yeah, there's a lot of things going on. But to be honest, there's going to be a lot of things going on every day of your life. And if you can learn how to get satisfaction from doing that difficult task, get it out of the way, feel satisfied with it, and then move on, that's the perfect way to then keep yourself motivated. Because as we're going to find out later in the show, accomplishing things, ticking things off the list, and getting those high profile actions ticked off and completed is a great way of having satisfaction and building motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how many French members that we have. Je ne sais pas. But what I do know is we have people who want to set their priorities and eat some damn frogs in the morning.
I'd say all of these individuals, all of our members, that is, eat their frogs in the morning. They consume their Moonshots podcast and their Moonshots memberships for breakfast as well. And hopefully it tastes much better, I would say, than frogs. Having said that, we'll have to let our members tell us that information. But I digress. Please welcome in our amazing members: Bob, Niles, Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa, Sid, and Mr. Bonjour. Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samuela, Barbara, and Deborah. Lasse, Steve, Craig, Ravi, Evert, Raul, Nikawara, and Ingram. Dirk, Venkata, Marco and Jet, Roger, Steph, Raw, and Diana, Christoph, Denise, Laura, and Smitty, Corey and Daniela, Mike, Antonio, Zachary, and Austin, Fred, Ola, Andy, Diana, Margie, Jasper, Fabian Guhong, and Edward. Guys, thank you so much for being part of the Moonshots family. It's amazing to have you with us, as well as learning out loud all together as part of the Moonshots family.
Yeah, big thanks and super grateful. And if you think we were getting exotic with our French cuisine, don't worry. We're going to go back to the simple things. We're going to go back and do our ABCs, Mark.
That's right. We're not only learning how to cook today, we're also learning how to spell. But the key technique and the key tip here is actually far greater and far more important than that. We're going to now hear a very, very practical productivity as well as prioritization methodology that comes from Brian Tracy's book, Eat That Frog. Now, Brian's going to take us through this. And I think what all of our listeners are going to have here is an actionable way, as we're going to explore shortly, in how to set up your day and get the most out of it every single time.
Now, the best way to organize your life is to use what we call the ABCDE method. The ABCDE method is a powerful priority setting technique that you can use every single day. Here's how it works. You start off by making a list of everything you have to do for the coming day. Preferably make your list the night before, or at least the morning before you start work. Never start work without a list. Think on paper. You then go down your list and you place an A, B, C, D, or E before each item on your list before you begin the first task. An A item is defined as something that is very important. This is something that you must do. It has serious consequences if you do it or you don't do it. This is a task that if you don't do it or fail to do it, like visiting a key customer or finishing a report for your boss that she needs for an upcoming board meeting, then it's going to be serious. People are going to be all over you. These are the frogs of your life. These are the things you've got to eat first. A B item is defined as a task that you should do, but it only has mild consequences if you do it or not, like returning a phone call, going for lunch with a coworker, even checking your email. These are not major tasks. These are the tadpoles of your work life. This means that someone may be unhappy or inconvenienced if you don't do a B task, but it's nowhere as important as an A task. Returning an unimportant telephone message or reviewing your email, as I said, would be a B task. The rule is that you should never do a B task when there's an A task left undone. You should never be distracted by a tadpole when there's a big frog sitting there waiting to be eaten. Now, a C task is defined as something that would be nice to do, but for which there are no consequences at all, whether you do it or not. C tasks include phoning a friend, having coffee or lunch with a coworker, or completing some personal business during work hours. This sort of activity has no effect at all in your work life, and you know something? Most people spend 50% of their time in C tasks that have no relevance to their work at all, and then they wonder why they're not getting ahead. A D task is defined as something that you can delegate to someone else. The rule is that you should delegate everything that anyone else can do so that you can free up more time for the A tasks that only you can do. An E task is defined as something that you can eliminate altogether, and it won't make any real difference. This may be a task that was important at one time, but which is no longer important to yourself or anyone else. Often it's something that you continue to do out of habit or because you enjoy it, but every minute that you spend on an E task is time taken away from a task or activity that can make a real difference in your life. The key to making this ABCDE method work for you is to practice discipline and start immediately on your A task and then stay with it until it's complete. If you have several A tasks, list them A1, A2, A3, and start on your A1 first. Use your willpower and your mental strength to get going and keep going on this one job, the most important single task you could possibly be doing. Eat the whole frog and don't stop until it's finished completely. This alone can double your productivity the very first day you begin using this system.
To think, Mark, that most people are spending 50% of their time doing things with no real consequence and not allocating it up to the top, to the A's. That's frightening, but do you know why it's so frightening, Mark? Because it's kind of relatable. When I'm not on my game and doing all that kind of stuff, it really hits home that like how much energy and effort is misdirected by people, right?
Absolutely. There's going to be so much time. If I was to go back and take a look and be a fly on the wall for a lot of the projects, a lot of the work that I've done, there will be undoubtedly hours whereby I've prioritized maybe a D task that I should have delegated. Maybe there's habitual E tasks that I've just got into the habit of continually doing, even though they're no longer relevant and should be eliminated. I think this very simple structure, and we're going to explore it a little bit more now, I know, is one of those aha moments that I wish I'd known. And I wish I'd had the discipline to really structure each of my days so that when I was looking at my A tasks, whether it's A1, A2, or just a simple, overarching Northern Star, that would have helped me so much stay aligned, be productive, and to be honest, probably do better work if I had known that. I think it's such a valuable lesson, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, to bring this alive, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pitch you a scenario and give you some examples of A, B, C, D, E, and we should discuss them and see how they come. I'd love to hear how you see them in your daily work, but also
Mm.
how we kind of get to these evaluations of A, B, C, D, and E. All right. So I want you to imagine, Mark, and for all of our listeners and viewers and members joining here, let's imagine that we are a married, busy executive. So I'm deliberately saying you got a good job, you got a great relationship. So you got a lot of stuff going on, personal and professional. Okay. So now I'm going to propose to you some examples of A, B, C, D, and E. Mike, and I'll give you some examples, and then we can discuss for each layer the trade-offs and how we get there and the messy stuff of life. All right. So these we'll start with the A's. These are the must-do. Just imagine this is the life to live for a married executive, and these are high priority tasks, and they have, Mark, serious consequences.
Mhm.
So a big one might be to finalize the quarterly financial report for the board meeting tomorrow. That feels like an A1. A2
Yeah.
might be attend your child's parent-teacher conference in the evening, right?
Mhm.
Third one might be to review and approve the new product launch plan before the end of the day. Now, what's quite interesting here, you've got stakeholders above you, below you, and most importantly, your stakeholders at home that you're caring
Mm.
for. These all feel like good ones, right? And I think, for example, the mistake I make is something like the parent teacher. You know it's important, but sometimes you don't make the right decision. Like if it was an important business meeting to get to, and let's say it took you 30 minutes when you look at the map planner, if it's a really important meeting, you'll say, let's leave at least 45, 60 minutes before. And if there's spare time, whatever. But I've been victim of leaving like, oh, it's 30 minutes till the meeting. I'll leave right now, 30 minutes to go. Like it's really tight. But that's where I'm not truly adhering to that priority. Like, for example, to do it better, what I did today is an important meeting at 11 and an important meeting at 12, both in downtown. So what I did is I got into town and took my 11 o'clock call where I could sit and do the call properly in town already. So it was easy to transition right next door to the meeting. Because if I didn't prioritize that, because I knew they were both A1s for me today, what would have happened is I would have compromised one of the meetings. So I think it's not only saying something's important, but then it's also the action of making it an A1. I
Hmm.
think that's what trips me up. What trips you up with your A's when we talk about eating the frog?
Similarly to, I think a little bit of a combination between eat that frog and actually the one thing that we studied last week, and that's identifying your A tasks as the ones that have the most bang for your buck, so to speak. And
Yep.
what I mean by that is they are going to be so valuable to do that it maybe reduces some of the B, C's, or D tasks further down in your list. So an example for me might be if you're doing, a renovation or you're tidying up your house, think about the A tasks as core elements that will have a positive impact on some of the other work that you're doing,
Right.
rather than, oh, this is a small job. I might as well just get this done right now. This
Yes.
might take me 30 to 60 minutes. That's going to be easy to do. That isn't necessarily an A task just because of the ease of doing it.
Yep.
Instead, the prioritization for me with an A task will be what are the things that I must do? They're important, they're high priority, but actually they might have a fantastic benefit for me later down the line because it might remove some of those B's or C's as well.
I love that build. That, when I think about that renovation example, for me, that is like making sure that the roof is waterproof or securing the
Mm.
foundations before you do the paint job on the inside.
That's exactly before building something from scratch, make sure that there's a solid foundation
Yeah,
because
right.
when, if something's not level, you're going to realize maybe 6 hours into a job and then it's going to fall over or worse. And that I think only comes from, as we were hearing from Brian Tracy just then, understanding what those tasks are, really considering the categorization of each of them. Maybe as we learned from that first clip, doing it the night before or the morning of, and really thinking in your examples, Mike, the parent teacher, for example, right, is that something I can delegate? No, I've got to attend it. Okay, well, where does that rank in, my A1, 2, 3? How do I then go out and tackle it? How am I going to make sure I've got enough time to get
Yes.
to each one?
Yes,
It's really being intrinsically detail orientated, isn't it?
it is. And I love the fact that what you've proposed to me is almost the idea that in your A's should be the one things, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
literally taking our previous episode and saying anything that's an A, A1, A2 should adhere to that. All right, so here's the next one. Here are the B's. These are the should do's, Mark. These are
Mhm.
tasks with mild consequence. I'm going to read three to you. Same use case, married executive. And this time you're going to pick the hardest one and tell us why. Okay. Responding to an email from a client about a non urgent inquiry, review a colleague's proposal that isn't due until next week, and arrange a service appointment for the family car. Where do you get tripped up on your B's? These are the should do's.
Oh, this is an interesting one because ordinarily I'd consider that email aspect potentially being a very, very key deliverable to hit. Likewise, with reviewing the colleague, they're going to be waiting on your feedback. So I'm going to think, though, the family car, because I wonder if that was to be removed from the situation. Yes, it doesn't necessarily adhere to the business side. It's much more of a life admin
Hmm.
situation. So maybe it should be a C, but actually the detrimental effect of maybe leaving that too late is that then impacts your ability to get into your job,
That's a great
into.
point. That's a great point.
Mm,
Just because you think, servicing the car,
mm,
you might be tempted to class it as a C, right?
mm,
But it could have
yeah.
consequences. This rings true to me. For example, I in the last for this 3 month bracket, I had my annual health checkup, right? So that was like really, really good to do. I had my annual dentist checkup. And then my next one is I'll go and get my eyes checked. Being a slightly older chappy, the old eyes are getting a bit foggy. But here's my thing. Here's what I do is I prioritize them, but I try to do one of these health ones or one of these bigger ones once a month.
Mm, yeah.
So that feels like the right tempo, the right blend for me. But you're absolutely right because the thing is there are still consequences. You gave the car example, and I think it's really good because we often deprioritize personal things, but actually, if you
Mm,
think about it, well, there's like safety. Then there's like also other things like the efficiency of the car might be deteriorating because it desperately needs a service or an oil change. I think what I try to do is I did my annual health check a couple of months ago, and I shared with some friends. I was like, I didn't realize how good I would feel doing it, right? I wasn't falling over and dying at the time. So it wasn't like my leg's about to fall off. Can you fix it? It was just like, oh, I
mm,
think I should get an annual health check.
mm,
But actually, I strangely felt good ticking off a B because it's something I should do with mild consequences, servicing the car, servicing the body, right? So this is, I think, important. And I think finding a way to accommodate it in your calendar, like once a month, is a good way to make sure that B's don't drop for C's. But Mark, we've still got some C's. Here's some nice to dos. All right, here we go. Catch up with a
mhm.
friend over lunch, organize your office or home workspace, and look at vacation options for next summer.
Oh, well, again, you're right. Those feel much more in that C bracket. They're great to have, nice to do, but no real consequence.
All right.
I think if I was to try and prioritize those sort of things, it's probably going to be the organization of your workspace. I'm a firm believer in the idea of having a clear workspace because based specifically on even the last few episodes we've done, Mike, a cluttered mind, a cluttered life of distractions is
Yes.
a way of becoming less organized. So for me, if I've doing my parent teacher situation and I'm thinking about my quarterly reports, then I'm making sure my car's sorted. I need to get my house in order as well. I need to have a clear desk. I need to organize my workspace
Yeah.
before then chatting to my friends or going out and planning a holiday.
So here's what's interesting about what you said. I think you can personalize your ABCDEs, right? I
Yeah.
could totally argue pushing a C2 up into the Bs.
Mm.
But here's the thing, and I think here's the real point to all this. Imagine if all of us, and I mean you, me, and our thousands and thousands of listeners all did this at least once a week to plan their week. Can you imagine the impact on the universe? I mean, that's a lot of people being a hell of a lot more productive.
It's funny, you know, we've spoken a lot about to-do lists. We're firm advocates of Todoist, you know, but it's very much a build on this, you know,
Mhm.
even though you might organize your to-do list tasks, the prioritization piece is the key kicker here.
Yeah.
Because without that, you're looking at a list. I often have a list of maybe 10 to 15 things to do every day. And I'll look at it and think, well, I need to figure out where to start.
Right.
And that's the key takeaway here, isn't it? Like you
Yes.
say, it can be personalized. Obviously, it depends on the work situation, so on and so forth. But you're right, it needs to be considered and it needs to be planned so that you do get the most out of your days when you are tackling these.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's all about doing justice to your
Mhm.
time. You know, again, something we learned over the last couple of episodes is if you don't protect your time, if you don't dictate what you're going to do, somebody else will. And that
That's
for me is just
yeah.
such a key takeaway from Cal Newport, from all of the work we've done on productivity, focus, habitual habit making. Isn't that, Mike, one of the key things that stands out to you as well?
Yeah, and that's why I was saying, like, imagine if you just did this properly once a week.
Mm.
Imagine if you and I just had a 30-minute call where we did our ABCDEs together. I actually think I would be even more effective, like having to share that with someone and to think it through and to be challenged a bit.
Mm.
Also, like, okay, what are you eliminating? Things like scrolling through social media, being in meetings that you don't have any contribution to, or here's a classic one. Last night, my wife and I watched Slow Horses, the awesome Apple TV show. And you watch one episode, and then you look at each other, and you're like, "Could do another one." But we celebrate. Nope, let's be geriatrics. Let's get into bed nice and early. Let's not push it. And then I woke up, and let me tell you, Mark, without showing off to you and all of our listeners, but because I made that decision, my sleep score last night on the Oura Ring was 95 out of 100.
Wow.
Okay. So you can make huge impact at the top of the bottom of this funnel, right? Whether it's an A or an E, you can make that
Mm.
difference, right?
Yeah, you really can. And again, I like the build that you did then, which is sharing with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Because as we've heard before, sometimes sharing tasks or goals, whether they're creative or otherwise, can help you stay accountable.
Mm.
And that can provide focus, much like, hey, January's come along. I want to get into, you know, a healthier way of eating, healthier way of exercise. Well, if you share that with a loved one or a friend, then that's going to help you stay motivated. So
Yep.
it's really just about finding whatever works for you. I'm the same as you, Mike. It's all about getting a good early night's sleep because then the next day, when I want to tackle my A tasks, it's just that little bit easier.
Yeah. Good to go. Good to go. I tell you what, though, Mark, once you've said, okay, I'm going to eat my frog in the morning,
Mm.
you've done your ABCDEs. The next thing is going deep and getting the job done. A huge moonshot theme. Holy smoke, we can rattle off list after list of experts, authors, and gurus that recommend going deep and being efficient with your time. But hey, Brian Tracy's touching on that as well.
That's right, Mike. We're going to hear from a build on Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog from Brian Johnson, another Moonshots favorite of ours. This time, he's going to help us understand the idea, a little bit of accountability, but also specifically delving into the issues and the problems with switching costs and how we need to stay single-handed.
So if you remember in that episode, we talked about impulsiveness, that impulsiveness is the greatest threat to our productivity. Being distracted And he said if you simply just take off your email notifications, you'd increase your productivity by 10%, which would boost your productivity in the course of a year. You'd basically add an additional month of productivity. That's crazy. 10% gain in productivity equals a month of more productive time over the course of a year. What? Crazy, right? So we want to single handle things. When you start something, finish it. You start something, you finish it. You start something, you finish it. You don't start something, check your email or your social feed, and then come back to it. That type of multitasking is a horrible waste of time. You're constantly getting your momentum back, figuring out where you left off, and it takes you way longer to do that than if you just handled it. Start, finish, start, finish. Get in the habit of finishing things. Nick Saban, the great football coach, collegiate football coach, that's his whole thing. Their process is they finish. They finish a tackle, they finish a workout regimen, they finish a practice, they finish a play in a game, they finish a game, they finish. And that leads to an extraordinary amount of success. So see if you have a habit of allowing yourself to be distracted and discipline yourself to single handle things. Start, finish, and notice your productivity go way up.
So this, oh my gosh, I see this mostly with email. It's funny how we even have A World Without Email from Cal Newport as a book to study. But to show you how Brian Tracy's thinking is coming alive here and how I use it, my personal story, Mark, is I do batch my email generally 3 to 4 times a day with a good 2 or 3 hours in between. I have no notifications. Particularly in the morning, this is my approach. So you see all email, right? And because I work a lot with different time zones, my first batch can be pretty dense kind of stuff, right? So I look, read, and then go, right, this is an archive action. So step 1 is, do I archive it, right? I've got the information I need. I actually am a bit old school. I quite like getting notifications. For example, on one of the teams that I work with, I get a notification every time one of their new business deals moves through the pipeline. I just find that very helpful of getting a sense of the activity that's happened overnight in Europe and the US. The next thing is answering yes or no. I love the Gmail auto response suggestions. Many of the times, I can be pretty brutally abrupt, yes, no, or just selecting one of the Gmail autoresponders. And then lastly, I might read something and then I use the snooze function in Gmail. So archive, answer, snooze. That's kind of ARS as an acronym.
Yeah, there you go. You heard it here first, listeners and members.
Yes.
The new email methodology hack.
We might need to send that to our massive marketing department, Mark. Fix that one up. But archive, answer, snooze. Like, here's the thing, is I get a look at that note that I need a longer, more thoughtful response, or I need to do work in order to respond. And I snooze it, and I know that there is batch times later in the day for me to address it, but I know subconsciously I'll start working on that request. What I also know is there's no like really quick emails where people are just like, Mike, do I have approval, whatever? And I can go yay or nay, or maybe let's discuss. The point here is I've handled it, and the getting to a zero inbox first thing in the morning, it's fine. I've got the snoozes. I am often changing the snooze expiration times. So sometimes I'm pushing a day or 2 out because I know I don't need to deal with this for a couple of days. But this email batching is a way to handle things, because the worst thing for me would be, well, after I've archived and answered, getting stuck in the morning with 10 or 20 emails that really require a thoughtful response from me. And I could lose 90 minutes, Mark. 90 minutes of my precious eat the frog time is just gone to email responses to other people's questions to me. I didn't even work on my number one priority. So I'm not on A1 at all.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And look, I've certainly experienced that a lot with emails, with Slack, with a lot of instant messaging.
Not a fan of the Slack.
it does become
Just
very,
another
very
inbox. It's
distracting.
just another inbox.
Well, if anything, it's more active than an inbox because it's immediate. And
Yeah.
what that does, in my experience, is that switching cost that we were just hearing about in the previous episode, as well as the clip just now, that takes up so much of your bandwidth. And for me, when I want to go deep, like we heard with Rick Rubin and the creativity series, if I don't eliminate distractions and if I don't immerse myself in the task, that multitasking element will hit my productivity to the nth degree. And the only way that I find, Mike, to build on exactly the breakdown that you were doing in terms of archive, answer, or snooze with regards to emails, when I've got tasks, I will plot it into my diary. So I'm looking at my diary right now, and I have pretty much the next 8 hours of items that I'm going to do in a specific order because that makes the most sense, both geographically from a time zone perspective, as well as factoring in, transportation elements. So really getting curious for me, and this is how it works, getting curious with regards to how much time I have to spend on each thing, knowing when maybe I need to hit the snooze or hit the stop button and then come back to it later. That's a way for me to be able to focus on the task at each appropriate time and know, similar to, scheduling in email batches and reviewing your inbox maybe a few times a day, is to then have the reassurance in the back of my mind, hey, don't worry about this task right now. You will come back to it. You can see in your diary that it's going to be in another 6 hours time, or maybe it's tomorrow. So then that anxiety for that specific task goes down because I know subconsciously I am going to come back to it and I know when I'm going to come back to it.
Yeah. So I think when you know something can be archived or answered with a yay or a nay, I think that clears out like 80% of the inbox, right?
Yeah.
And so you're feeling good, you've got that out, the other stuff you've got snoozed and you're considering. So you can go to inbox of zero and get on with things. But also I think truly if you imagine you have this precious resource in the morning, right? Which is the best quality attention and energy. Let's just call it 9 to 11. You're at peak, right? Do you really want to spend most of that doing email? Or do you want to write that article? Do you want to think about that plan or creatively explore ways to build your business or spend half an hour reading a book and writing a little journal about what you read and really ingesting that? Like, it's really a question of how do you respect and value your time? And more broadly, you have to, if you want to, go as fast as a Ferrari, you have to treat yourself like a Ferrari. You have to make yourself like a Ferrari and know that you need to get all of the conditions right for you to be at your best. Instead of being tackled by Slack and email, and then before you know it, it's lunchtime, and you didn't even get to your number one, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't even get
I'm
there.
reminded.
But then you've got
I'm
lunch
reminded.
hangover. You're like, oh, too many carbs, right?
It's like when you go to the gym and you can see, a handful of people, they're there, they've probably only got, 30 to 60 minutes to hit their goals in the gym. But what they're doing in between each set or each exercise is sitting on their phone.
Oh, gosh.
They're choosing it, maybe texting, maybe taking photos or changing music, whatever it is. To me, that is a pure a demonstration of that distraction.
Yes.
You're not immersing yourself in the task because
Yes.
you're now wasting time playing on your phone. For me, put away the phone. If you're only there for a certain amount of time, do yourself justice. Honor the time that you've dedicated
Yeah.
and you've provided to that task by sticking to it.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that what we're seeing here is a nice build. Like, get up at the crackers, really prioritize, work on your A's. And as you go through your day, single handle things. Don't double touch. If you can archive, if you can answer, or if it needs more, like be clear and stay to that. What a build. But I think we need a little something, Mark, to bring us home here. How can we really and truly smash this? Like, how can we really embody this thinking from Brian Tracy?
Yeah, good question, Mike. And the good news for you, our listeners and members, is I've got a closer that's perfect for that question. Let's now lean in. Let's think about how we're going to bring this into our lives each day, but also let's find a little bit of satisfaction from eating the frog. Even though it tastes maybe a little bit rough, there are ways that you and I and all of our listeners can train ourselves to really get into the habit of accomplishing those difficult tasks early on. So let's hear from Brian Tracy one more time today, author of Eat That Frog. Help us understand continual productivity and the concept of getting addicted.
You can actually develop a positive addiction to endorphins and to the feeling of enhanced clarity and confidence and competence that they trigger. When you develop this addiction, which you get from working and completing your most important task, you will, at an unconscious level, begin to organize your life in such a way that you are continually starting and completing ever more important tasks and projects. You will actually become addicted in a very positive sense to success and contribution. You'll want more and more of it, and nothing else will satisfy you. Setting short and long-term goals will help you experience this hooked feeling as the satisfaction of accomplishing each task triggers the brain's reward and pleasure system. The final takeaway is that there are no shortcuts. You must practice, practice, practice. Practice is the key to mastering any skill. Fortunately, your mind is like a muscle. It grows stronger and more capable with use. With practice, you can learn any behavior or develop any habit that you consider either desirable or necessary. What is your frog? What is the one task that you despise doing or try to get out of or put off doing every morning? Once you have chosen your frog, make it a habit to wake up every morning and do that task first before anything else.
I really like this idea of getting addicted. As strange as that might sound, I think it has parallels with David Goggins that you're never finished, right? It has parallels with making it not a habit, but a lifestyle, a la James Clear and Atomic Habits. But more than anything, if you want to be a high performer, you just have to work on it. You have to practice on it, and you will become it through practice and habit. And to be really frank, the thing that Brian said there that really hits home is there's no shortcuts. There really isn't in the end. There is no quick six-pack abs. There's no like drop shipping millionaire status after 3 months. Really, in the end, it's about doing the work. And this has presented us with a series of steps that we can take to do the work. And I think if we defer instant gratification and do actually eat the frog in the morning, it's going to be, as Darren Hardy said, the magic of compound interest. You're going to wake up in a year's time and go, dang, I'm a beast. I am getting things done. I'm creating the life that I wanted to create and being the person that I wanted to be. I think that's what's really on offer here, don't you, mate?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And, building on that with James Clear, 1% a day,
Mm-hmm.
that's all it takes. So even if we were to start today and just simply start thinking about the tasks that we're doing, being a little bit curious and start to have the idea of prioritization, even if you can't start it today, and you fall back into your habits of maybe accomplishing D tasks, E tasks. Maybe with D tasks, it's pretty hard to delegate. That's okay too. Just practice, put it into your mindset and reflect on it each day because, like Brian told us just then, the mind is a muscle. It can do whatever you want it to do, and it'll get stronger the more you stay curious with it, the more you train it. And I love that idea, Mike, because I think that's what you and I and our members and listeners are doing. By getting curious with all of these books and methodologies, I think we're building some of those pattern recognitions, those habits in our own lives and our minds, which then enables us to potentially put into practice some of these tips. But it does just take a little bit of time, doesn't it? And that's okay.
It does indeed. It does indeed take a bit of time, and it is okay. But what a playbook, right, Mark? Like, pick up this if you're a starter or if you're just a maestro and you want to like calibrate and check that you're not missing something that you could optimize in your life, I find this just a wonderful book to remind us that a la, do you remember Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Club, right?
Oh,
This
yes.
is like the brother book of Eat That Frog. There are these proven approaches that if you want to get the most out of yourself and really go far in life, then it is simple things like early bird catches the worm. Oh, when that clip was playing, it reminds me of the saying, if you want to get something done, give it to someone who's busy.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're
That's a
like,
fun one.
yep, sure, goes on the list, got a system, bam, I'm
Cool.
eating the frog,
I'm in
done,
it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I like that. I mean, Mike, for me, all these tips, all these methodologies that we've learned today speak volumes, and particularly off the back of such stimulating shows on essentialism and the one thing. For me, even though I love the concept of single-handed and handling things as they come up rather than trying to multitask, I've got to say this prioritization framework of A, B, C, D, E has really captured my curiosity. And I've already started since, pulling together the show, started to really put that into practice each day. And I think that's so valuable to really scrutinize each one. Like
Yeah,
you say, give the tasks to somebody else if they're busy, because we're going to jump on it when you are in the mode of accomplishing things. If you can find those key tasks, if you can find the things that you can delegate or
right.
even eliminate as ease, that for me speaks so much with regards to, how limited our time really is. It's the only way for me to really claw back some of the bandwidth that I think we have in our days. When you reflect on today's episode, what's the key takeaway, the key habit that you're thinking about implementing into your life now?
Uh, I think it's also with the ABCDE, and I think it's saying to yourself what it's on both ends. So being tough on saying what's an A and what's an E. Like I
Mm.
think I flip flop around a bit, like trying to reduce on the E's, eliminate, but then like I think I need to work better on balance, having a balanced approach through the whole alphabet,
Yeah.
Um, and I think therein's probably the rub.
Yeah.
Um, but mate, we've got a lot of homework to do, and I hope our listeners and our viewers and all of our members are inspired by this. We have mentioned so many other books. Obviously, go to moonshots.io to get any of our back catalog of shows for any of the ones that we've mentioned. But Mark, I want to say a huge thank you to you for providing not only a bunch of clips for today, but helping us broaden our culinary horizons. We've eaten the frog in the morning. We're off to the races. And I'd love to thank you to our members, our viewers, and our listeners here on what has been quite the show 268, where we got into Brian Tracy's work, Eat That Frog. And we had 4 steps in this journey. We got up early at sunrise to eat the frog, the hardest, the awkward, the challenging thing. We do that for breakfast. We deploy the ABCD method to ensure that we are putting our energy in the right places and not the wrong ones. And when we are tackling things, we do them single handedly. We don't double handle or triple handle. And lastly, we go way beyond habits. We go way beyond checklists. We practice this daily. We get addicted. We become the lifestyle we want to have. We don't just practice habits. We build a life worth living. That's what we are all about here on the Moonshots podcast. That's a wrap.